Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm Michael, and today we're going to hear some stories from Michael Gabardi. I reached out to Michael after finding his Instagram account, Ole Guy Hunting. He kept posting some classic photos of himself throughout the years and putting some very detailed notes below trying to explain the story. And I kept thinking to myself, man, this guy has to have so many stories, so I figured I'd bring him on the show. And he absolutely does. Today, he just rattles off story after story, some that happened before I was even born. So I want to thank Michael for coming on the podcast because it was a real pleasure to speak with him. I can't wait to have Michael back on because he's still out there making stories. So enough chatter for me. Let's go ahead and let Michael tell you his stories. All right, Mike, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Michael? I appreciate you having me on tonight.
Oh, I'm doing great now that you're here. I'm really excited to see some of your stories. I've seen your Instagram page. I know you tagged me in a couple things, and you've put down some great stories there. And I can't wait for you to actually be able to tell us these stories rather than just a couple photos and a couple paragraphs on Instagram. So why don't we start with this, Mike? Why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners out there?
I sure will. I'm Michael Gabardi. I live in southwestern Colorado, and I started hunting when I was about 14 years old, and I'm 64 now. So if that gives you any indication.
Couple of years.
Yeah. Strictly to bow hunting in 1978. So before it was cool.
That's true.
And so I actually, when I started bow hunting, it not only was it not cool, but it was like it had only been around in Colorado and legalized for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. So, there was still a lot of controversy over bow hunting in Colorado. And the big thing back then was most of the rifle hunters, they would accuse you of shooting them with a gun and sticking an arrow in it. And so that big thing back then, they just didn't think it could be done,
Yeah.
And so anyway, I never hunted, never took a sidearm with me in 40 years. And because, when I started this thing out, started in 78, in the first year, I hit a nice 4-point mule deer buck. We'd shot all summer long, and I hit the south end of a northbound buck.
Oh.
And so that ended up not a good feeling inside because we never found him. Looked for him for 2 days.
Yeah.
And so my first year out, I did not have a good impression of bow hunting. But anyway, as the years evolved and I evolved and understood tracking and all that sort of thing, which I knew really basically nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
So we just kind of evolved from there.
Perfect. That's great. Yeah, a lot of hunters have a tough first experience. In fact, I just interviewed Ben with Wad Prep. The episode's not live. It will be by the time this one is. But his story was about basically wounding his first animal, and it just tore him apart. So even though it's cool now, it's still not any easier, right?
No, it's not. And, regardless of what anybody says, if you bow hunt long enough, sooner or later, you're going to wound one and you're not going to find it. Mm-hmm. And then you see lots of pictures, and even on Instagram, though, you see pictures of where they got the broadhead stick in them, and they, 2-3 years later, and they were still going. And so that feel a little better, but when you do it yourself, it does not make you feel good.
Absolutely. I haven't had enough opportunity to wound anything yet, but I'm sure it's in my future soon. So, well, let me ask you this, Mike. You are ahead of the curve as far as gentlemen of your age on Instagram. What got you into your Instagram?
Well, that's a good question. I actually, I only started that thing about 6 months ago, maybe. And so, the kids and whatnot kept saying, yeah, you need to start. Well, I tell you, I got so many stories because I've actually been bow hunting now for like 43 years.
Mhm.
So many stories and pictures and videos and all that stuff's just, been sitting around, probably be lost one day. So I just started tagging some of those pictures on Instagram and, getting a little feedback. And I thought, well, hey, this is kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, you caught my attention. My wife and I are actually trying to do the same thing with my father-in-law. So he may be done hunting. We're not quite sure, but we're trying to get him to capture some of his stories audibly here on the podcast. I've proposed the idea to him, but he's kind of mulling around as to which stories he wants to tell and trying to kind of organize them because they're old stories. So he's trying to make sure that he gets them all right. And then he just got onto Instagram for the same reason. We're like, start to keep track of these things, put them out there for people to see. So that's great. It's good that people got you involved with that. And you caught my attention. Absolutely. Your Instagram page is great. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes so people can make sure to check it out. Hopefully we'll get you a couple more followers so you can tell some more stories.
Yeah, that'd be good. So starting in 1978, and of course I wounded that first buck, and then it was pretty much a dry spell for a couple years. 1981 rolls around, and I sneak up on this little fork-horn buck, and 15 yards, and then the dang thing takes off running up the other bank and runs out in the pasture. And so, of course, what I should explain is I shot traditional and shot instinctively. And so, it wasn't big on the sights and trigger releases and all that kind of stuff back then. That wasn't even that big of a thing. Most people shot fingers with sights and whatever. But so I always shot instinctively, and I just took off down that gully, ran up the other side. And as soon as I got to the top, I seen him standing out there, and I just pulled back and launched it. And he ended up being 73 yards, and I killed him on the spot.
Wow.
And that's like, unheard of. But
Yeah,
the
73 yards traditional.
right. Well, and the thing is, though, and what I always said, and I just always loved traditional hunting, but if you'd have had sights on when you ran up to the other side of that bank, you'd have had to mentally process, okay, how far is he? Where do I need to hold? And I never even had to think about that. You just draw back and shoot when you shoot instinctively. You don't even think about how far he is. You just pick a spot and go. So then after that buck, then I was pretty elated because I finally got it done. And
you hooked.
I remember bringing it back to the house, and my grandpa was there. He was probably like 80 some years old at the time. And, he didn't think I would ever get it done. And so I was pretty happy. But then a couple weeks later, I killed a pronghorn out there. And back then they didn't sit on water holes. They didn't, we just spot and stopped. And that's hard to do. Hello.
That's what I hear. Speed goats.
But anyway, I got that done too. And that's when I decided that I was going to try to take, back then, and you've probably heard of it, the Big 8 in Colorado. Mm-hmm. So I made a decision to myself that I was going to take the Big 8 with a bow and arrow, and it was going to be traditional equipment. And so that's for the next 10 or 12 years, that's what I pursued.
That's amazing. Just so I'm sure not all the listeners know what the Big 8 are. Do you mind rattling them off?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So you got, of course, mule deer, you had white-tailed deer, you had pronghorn antelope, you had elk, and you had mountain goat and bighorn sheep and mountain lion and black bear. So that was the Big 8. Yeah. And then as the years evolved, where now they have a Big 10 because they do have desert sheep and they have moose, but back then that wasn't that prevalent. You couldn't hardly draw a moose tag in that. So, but anyway, so that's what I worked on for the next 12 years. I think I finally got it done in 93, actually. So I was one of the youngest guys in the state to get it done.
Wow.
And it was a lot of fun. Now, and even when I talk about elk hunting, I killed my first bull, and I've killed 12 bulls with a bow. but I killed my first bull in 1983. And back then, there was no such thing as a diaphragm call or, any kind of call, really. But what I used was, and what the closest thing it reminds me of is a kazoo. You remember get a kazoo that had the little thing on the end, you pull it out and make different tones. Well, it was kind of like that, but that's what I called my first bull in with. And it was just like a classic thing. Comes in the 20 yards, shoot him right in the lungs. He just kind of turned the other direction, walked off about 10 yards and dropped. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I took a wonderful buck in velvet, 170-ish that year.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, I was kind of on a roll from that point that I was pretty much shooting deer and elk every year. And so when the last picture that I posted on Instagram was the goat. And that was a very interesting hunt. That was, I'd scouted those things for a week before, and come opening day, I knew right where they'd be. And so they was about 11,000 feet where they'd been hanging out. And so I took off before light, went up to the top of that mountain, and I searched that whole mountain and could not find those goats. And they'd been there for a week. And so I ended up noon or 1 o'clock, I ended up heading back down to camp, got down to camp. And I had a buddy down there that was hunting elk at the time. His name was Mark Burns. And he said, well, they're right there now. I can see them. So I looked through the rock, right where they should have been. They just probably crevice or doing whatever. And so I went back up the mountain at about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I got up on them and made a stalk. And it, there again, traditional, because I had got about probably 30 yards from these goats, and there was two billies, and they take off running. And of course, I didn't think anything about them taking off running because I shot at moving targets all the time and stump shooted, and I shot at like throwing discs up in the air, and I shot at clay pigeons. I shot at all kinds of stuff. and I shot, daily, and you have to when you shoot instinctively and traditional.
Yeah.
But anyway, they took off running. I didn't think anything about it. I just pulled back, nailed him at 50 yards.
Wow.
So it was a little far back, kind of in the kind of in the guts, but angling up a little bit where it might have caught a little liver. And so, but they take off around the cliff, and when I get to the bottom of the cliff where I seen them go, I just catch something out of the corner of my left eye, and this goat was standing up above me about 40 feet on this cliff, and just come over, and he'd peek his head over, and then he'd go back, and then he'd come over and peek his head over. So I made a stalk to get up above him, and went all the way around to get up above him. Once I did, I was like almost right on top of him. And when I drew and shot, of course, he fell off the cliff. And
of course.
But at that time, when that thing fell off the cliff, all of a sudden I hear this, oh yeah, where'd it go? There's like 12 guys down by our camp sitting at their motorhome watching me make this stalk on this mountain goat.
Wow. That's so cool. How far was camp? Like a mile or like half mile?
A mile, but it was like straight up to 11,000 feet. So the camp was probably at 995. Okay. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. And not only that, but the good part about that is because now it's getting close to dark, right? And then I still have to cape him out and do all that. But they all came up the mountain and helped me pack him off.
Oh, that's great.
And so that was just a awesome awesome time.
Yeah. Were those guys also shooting archery traditional, or were
They
they rifle hunting or?
they were I think they were compound shooters, but they were hunting for elk at the
Gotcha.
time.
Okay.
And
That's still pretty great to do it in front of an audience like that. You probably had no idea until they were hollering.
oh, I didn't. I had no couldn't figure out where the noise was coming from. But then I got my binoculars out, and they're like all these guys lined up along their motorhome watching the whole thing. So so that was kind of cool. It was a story for me and a story for them, I guess.
Absolutely. I guarantee that each one of those gentlemen told that story again at some point or another.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so as of late, what I've been doing is well, I'll tell one more quick story about my bighorn sheep. But I back then you didn't have points. And so I think they started the point system about in 87 or something like that. And so I drew my bighorn sheep tag in 86.
Mm-hmm.
It was along the Front Range there, along the Rampart Range. You probably know where that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't shave, and I told everybody I wasn't shaving until I killed my ram. And so anyway, day 29, finally got it done. And I look kind of like you when I
Yeah.
got done.
I'll tell you, it took me a lot longer than 29 days to grow this beard, but I'm not a great beard grower, as it turns out.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been clean shaven since I got married, and I got married in, let's see, 2017. So it's been a minute.
So it has been a few years.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you are a bow hunter?
I'm a new bow hunter. So I picked up a bow about 3 years ago. And the only thing I've ever shot with it are turkeys and squirrels.
Okay.
So whenever I go big game hunting, I seem to just go hiking with my bow.
Well, yeah, that happens. That I should probably bring up too, because I think, in my opinion, it was a lot easier back in the day. Not easier from the standpoint of hunting them, because especially like hunting elk or some of those timberline bucks it's hunting.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to get on them. But I think one of the advantages that I had was back in the day that I had, I used a topo map and a compass. In fact, after I'd taken several animals, I had a good friend that was a master sergeant out of Peterson Air Force Base. And he was in the survival instructing thing. And I was probably one of the only guys that he actually hired me out there to be a survival instructor for the air crew members.
Oh, wow.
And so I worked out there for like 3 years. But, I think the topo map and the compass, back then, people wouldn't leave their trucks. I mean, they wouldn't get more than 100 or 200 yards from their truck. And I'd just take a topo map and I'd put a backpack on and I'd be gone, and I didn't, I went because I knew exactly how to read the map and how to vector myself and how to,
Yeah.
So,
that gives you a huge advantage over nowadays. Everybody's got, the mobile apps. You can just walk wherever you want. Your phone always tells you where you are. But 30 years ago, no, yeah, I'd probably be one of those guys stuck in my truck.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that's the way it was back then. So I think, like, especially elk are shy anyway, they don't like people. So I think, at least down here where I live, I know they have you got to go further now. And I think I've always been the type of guy, I either go in on a horse or, back in my younger days, I just backpacked, just took off and went. And I didn't care if it took me 5 trips to get the elk out or whatever it took.
Yeah.
But, it's a little harder now, but now I definitely horse. So, yeah. But I think, that the apps have changed a lot. And before them was the GPS, because same thing.
Yeah.
They could get out there and they could just pin their truck and they they wouldn't have to worry about getting lost. And that was a big factor back in the day.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was easier, but I saw a lot less people. I can tell you that.
I'm sure. I think there were just in general less hunters, right? So you had more land to yourself, especially here in Colorado. Now it's famous for being overcrowded.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And even down here in this unit here for elk, the year before last, before they limited it, there was 1,100 archers.
Wow.
This unit.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, it's a huge number. And so, it's a little harder to compete when they can all go wherever they want. And, so they just kind of push the elk higher, and you just got to hunt harder. That's all.
Yeah. Yep.
And so like last year, in fact, I packed in 11 miles.
Ooh. Wow. With horses, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
How many horses do you have?
Well, I have one that I rode and one that I packed. So, and then I just picked them out there, and I actually had a friend that drew a license in the same area. So he had a muzzleloading license. So he was up there hunting for a week or so, but I spent 17 days up there. Yeah, because I was bound and determined to kill my bow.
Yeah. Did you run into many hunters back there 11 miles back?
I never saw any hunters.
That's perfect. That's why you do it, right? That's why you go that deep.
Yep, that's exactly right. I mean, it's there is an outfitter, but he's about 4 miles down the canyon.
Okay.
And so he doesn't ever hunt up there. So it works out good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I finally, what I have struggled with and what I've been trying to do for 40 years is kill a 300 bull.
Okay.
It was 292 last year.
Oh, tell us the story about it when you got him. Like you were 11 miles deep and.
Well, so it just happened to be like my buddy had killed a nice bull, the 315 bull with his muzzleloader, and that was during the muzzleloading week. And so then he went back home to pack it out, take it to, get it processed and all that sort of stuff. And then he came up the next weekend, and because what I'm struggling with now is I lost hearing in my right ear. And so what happened was, the elk were bugling all day, every day, but I couldn't pinpoint them. And so my buddy came back up the next weekend, and we went together because he could tell which direction the thing's coming from now. And we went back there, and I just had him cow call, and we had 2 bulls. We had 1 bull come in right on top of him, but I probably wouldn't have shot it anyway. It was a 5 point. But then he did a few more cow calls, and I could see a 6 point coming, and he stepped out of the tree at 20 yards, and that was it.
There you go.
There you go.
292.
Yeah. So
you'll just have to try harder next year or this year, I guess.
Well, exactly. We drew a different unit this year, and we're going to go try it again. So, and have you done any bear hunting?
Yes, but always as a complimentary to my elk. So I'm going elk hunting, and I have a bear tag. And if I see a bear and I'm not seeing any elk, I'll chase after the bear. So I've chased after a few big bears. I've actually even, I think, told one of these stories in one of my podcasts. Got pretty dang close to one about 10 yards and realized I wish I'd had my sidearm with me because I was all of a sudden very scared. But yeah, haven't had any luck, but it's really high on my list. In fact, we had Doug Bose, who wrote the book on black bear hunting, and I've got his book and I've read it once, and I'm going to read it again before the season starts and try and put a little bit more effort towards bear this year.
Now, is he from Colorado?
No, he's from, I want to say like northern coastal Washington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so I killed my first bear with a recurve when it was the last year that you could bait bear in Colorado.
Oh, okay. When was that?
And that was 1992.
Okay.
And so I had never hunted bear before, but it was one of the big eight, so I had to do it. So, and of course, I can't do anything the easy way, where you just drive up to it and you walk 50 yards and put the bait down. I had to pack the bait 2 miles back in there once I got there. So,
Yeah.
and I had a buddy with me, and one day he was gonna help take the bait in. He didn't like that. I was taking 80 pounds of bait in each trip.
What were you taking in? Just old chicken or?
Well, that's a good question, because I actually had a friend that worked at the Broadmoor Hotel.
Okay.
And he was the main chef.
This bear got fed well,
huh? This bear got fed well. So he would save all the scraps, the good stuff. I mean, there was crab legs and lobster and steak, and I mean, you can't believe the kind of food these bears were getting. And I ended up seeing 17 bears in 7 days.
Wow, 17 different bears.
Yeah, and so finally got that done on a good boar, and but my friend never did help me pack any more stuff in there because
packing in old shellfish. I'm not surprised that he only helped once.
Yeah.
So why did you get to the set? Did you shoot the 17th bear? Or did you see bears after you shot your bear?
No, I shot the last one actually, and I didn't see them all, at the bait, but I would stay there till dark. And back then I was kind of a little nervous of bears. But so between the bait site and back the 2 miles to camp, which I always walked in the dark, man, I'd see bears on the way back every night. Like, a lot of them come in late, and they were probably on their way to the bait when I'm on my way out of there. And it was, you'd hear them. I mean, they'd sense you, and they're whoo, 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 like that. It got a little sketchy every now and then.
I bet. Now, the next question I have was the 17th bear, the one that you shot. Was that the best bear? Was that the one that you wanted? Are you happy with the bear, or did one get away?
Oh yeah, he was a great boar. Yep, chocolate covered boar. Had about an 18-inch skull. I made green, but then I didn't. I never, I have 2 or 3 animals that would have made the book, but that really was never a priority of mine.
Yeah.
And so when I was going for the big 8, it had to be a male adult species, representative species. That's what I was going for. And so got that done.
Great. I gotta ask this question. I know you've definitely completed the Big 8, and then you said that there is now a Big 10. Have you since then finished off the Big 10?
Probably in my lifetime, probably never draw the desert sheep. I'm working on trying to get the moose, but so far I haven't drawn.
How many moose points do you have now?
I just actually started putting in again, but I think I have 5 now.
Okay.
So there's been people draw them with 5. We'll just see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping, I'm rooting for you. This is fun. What other stories you got? You want to tell us more about your Big 8, or do you have some other story that maybe means something special to you, or is particularly funny, like the one where the boys cheered you on from the bottom down at camp?
Well, and so I have a hunt in it was actually a rifle hunt in 2020.
Okay.
That I went for elk, and it ended up being more of a survival thing than an elk hunt. But
it snowed a lot in 2020. I mean, it snowed early September, and I believe in second rifle as well. It snowed big, didn't it?
Right, and this was 3rd season.
Okay.
They were calling for 4 to 5 inches, and some wind. And so I just had one horse with me, packed my stuff on it, and I walked in there. And I have a certain place I like to go for rifle hunting. It doesn't always produce, but so I'm walking in there and I see 150 head of elk. This is Friday night, and the season opens Saturday.
Wow.
This is going to be awesome. So I let them just kind of mill around and, leave. And then we got back in there, and probably about 4 miles in, I suppose, on this trip. And I got back in there and just barely got the tent set up before dark. And all I had was a dome tent because, I thought, well, 4 or 5 inches, I can just beat that off. That's no big deal.
Just give tent a good shake.
I got 30 inches in 28 hours.
Ooh.
So I found out that my dome tent is not a 4-season tent, first of all. And
Okay.
I had to beat stuff up. I had to cut a spruce tree to hold it up because it started breaking the fiberglass poles.
Jeez.
I had so much snow on it. And then
Did you just hunker down for the whole storm, or were you out hunting during it?
Well, in the morning, I started hunting, but I mean, it was snowing so bad you couldn't see.
Yeah.
And like, dude, this ain't gonna work. So I went back to the tent and I just tried to hunker down. But being the like to go as light as I can, I only had enough propane to 2 or 3 hours in the morning to cook up a little stuff, and a little bit at night, and a couple at night. Well, I ran out of propane. So because I was in that tent for 28 hours and it was blowing and snowing, the tent looked like my dome tent ended up looking like a teepee, all the snow against it. And so 28 hours later, when it kind of let up a little bit, I was like, dude, I gotta get out of here. I'd have no propane left. My jacket. Well, and if you're familiar with using a dome tent, they have that netting all around them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Around, about halfway up, and then you just put the rain fly over the top. Well, that snow was just blowing right through there. My sleeping bag wet.
Oh no.
And my I had a big heavy coat, and it was just froze solid.
Oh.
I was like, dude, what the heck am I thinking? So anyway, I got up about 4:30 in the morning, and I started packing my stuff up inside there. Well, I couldn't even get the tent up.
Yeah.
I had 2.5 feet of snow against my tent. I couldn't even get the stakes out of the ground. And then it froze up the creek. There's a little creek right there, and that's why I came in, because I have the horse, and he can just go down there and drink water. And it froze it solid overnight, that creek.
Jeez.
Dude, so I wish that was the end of the story, but it isn't. So it takes me it's about 4 miles. It only takes me about an hour and a half to walk in there, if it's dry and whatnot. But this particular day on the way out, walking out in 30 inches of snow with no snowshoes, no nothing. The horse fell down 4 times on the way out. And it took me 5 hours to get back down to the truck walking in that snow. And I was done.
I bet. I bet. So this was 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, this was 2 years ago. So I'm 63. And the other thing I ought to say is 99 out of 100 times that I hunt solo. I go by my, and so it just happened to be that my buddy drew a license last year, or I'd have been hunting elk by myself. But so when I got down to the truck, the worst part wasn't over, because of the mild winds and all the beetle kill that we have in Pagosa Springs and around the area. It's 23 miles into the end of that road. and
Oh
there were
no.
blown down trees all the way across it. So I get my cell phone out. I have no signal. And so I walk to the top of a hill and tie the horse off and try to get up there where I can get some signal. Still no signal. Come down that one and go across the road and go up what's called Bear Mountain right there. And I go up to the top of Bear Mountain, no signal. And I'm like, dude, there's only my truck and one other truck at the end of this road. And so I'm thinking, all right, well, now what? All of a sudden, I see a search and rescue helicopter coming and lands beside my truck. And
What?
oh,
Whoa.
so I go running down the mountain. It's like, don't leave me. I go running down the mountain, and the other truck, those guys had backpacked in, and I knew right where they went because I've seen them up there before. And they were about a mile away from where I camped as a crow flies, but they backpacked in. So there was no way they were walking out with packs on and 30 inches of snow.
Yeah.
And there was an older feller and his son, and the older feller just had bruises all over him. He had fallen down so many times, but he ended up, which is why people need to understand that's why you pay that 25 cents or whatever it is on your hunting license, because all you got to do is make a phone call and they will come get you. And so anyway, they had called search and rescue, and so they were there actually flying them out of their camp. And when they got there, I showed them all the trees blown down. And I said, you probably better call your ground crew because I'm not getting out of here. And so they actually called the ground crew that started from the bottom side of the 23 miles. And then they took the helicopter, flew back to Pagosa, grabbed two more guys, brought them up to the top, and had them started cutting from the top side. And this is only like, an hour and 45 minutes from my house on a normal day. And I had gotten to my truck about 9 o'clock. I didn't get home till 11:30 at night.
9 in the morning, right?
Yeah. I got to my truck that day when I was trying to get signal at like 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning. And I didn't get back to my house till 11:30 at night. So that's how long it took them to cut that road out and for me to actually get out of there.
Man, that's an adventure. Well, I'm glad you're all right. I remember 2020 and all that weather. I remember going. It's a little obviously not nearly as harrowing of a story, but I was up kind of north near Walden hunting, and a storm rolled in, and my buddy and I are sitting here glassing this hillside, and the storm rolls in on our left, and the storm rolls in on our right, and it's just black clouds. And we're like, maybe we should get out of here. So we stand up, turn around, and that storm hits us smack dab in the face. And we're walking a mile with just basically getting blasted by ice and snow right into our face, just to try and get back to the truck, to just try and like stay alive, because it came out of nowhere. It wasn't even supposed to snow that day. Crazy year. We had a lot of fun. When we got back to the truck, we sat there. It's like, it'll blow over eventually. And we had the foresight to bring shotguns in the truck with us. And I knew that the area is littered with snowshoe hares. So we actually walked around, with 15, 20 feet of visibility, just trying to kick up some rabbits. And we actually got one and threw it in some gumbo that night. So it was not nearly as bad of a story as you, but it's good eating and a lot of fun, despite the snowstorm ruining the elk hunt.
Well, yeah. And that's it's funny that you mentioned Walden, because I killed my first 4 bulls up there. I used to work for the parks, Colorado State Parks.
Okay.
And so I worked at Colorado State Forest up there, if you know where that is, by Rand.
I do.
Cool. And that's where I killed my first 4 bulls, was right there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. Now it's got the wolves. So we'll see what happens to all the elk in that area.
Well, yeah. And then when they introduce all the new wolves, we'll see what happens.
Exactly, right? We got them already. Let's throw some more in there.
Yep, that's it. Well,
that's great, Mike. What I know you said you had 2 or 3 specific. Do you have any other ones?
I have I used to do a lot of rifle hunting with my dad, talking about the snowstorms. We used to go by Gunnison, and we used to hunt north of Gunnison in the wilderness over there, West Devil Wilderness. And it was pretty similar to this situation in 2020. One year we went up there and we're way back in there. My dad and his friends cut this trail out there south back in the 60s. And so it had always been the family place to go. It's where my grandpa went. It's where everybody went, right? And
that's awesome.
We got up there and got 30 inches of snow overnight. And it might have been more than that because it was up to the horses' bellies.
Wow.
You had to cross the creek like, many, many, many times going up through this little draw. And it was very dangerous anyway, because there was a lot of rocks and stuff, and they had those shoes on their feet, and they, you hit ice on the rocks with those shoes, and it's just like glass, they just slide. Jeez. But anyway, we had to pack up that next morning there and get out, and that was a harrowing experience when the snow's up to their bellies and you can't see.
Do you remember what year that was? And obviously you didn't have a dome tent. What were you guys camped out in? Or were you just sleeping under the stars?
It was probably, no, we packed a wall tent in there.
Okay.
You always did. And it was a big one. 8 or 10 guys that went in with us.
Wow.
And all brothers and uncles and whatever. But I think we was, it must have been probably late 60s or early 70s, probably. I wasn't very old at the time. And so it might have been late 70s.
Okay.
Not mid 70s, probably about 75, I bet. So I was probably 16 or 15 or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that snowstorm that I was talking about up north, we got out of there. I only had a few days to hunt because I had just a cow tag, and my main hunting season was still archery earlier. But several hunters had to get rescued. Those snowstorms are no joke. They can come in and cut off all access. So several hunters got rescued from basically the exact mountain that we were on. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it can happen quick. And if you're not prepared, oh my goodness. Oh, we found back in the day when we hunted up north of Gunnison, we had 2 different guys that I can remember that got lost, because it's easy country to get lost, and that's before GPSs and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, we've had them come through our camp at night, and they were just, scared to death, number one, right? And lucky to find our camp, because there just weren't any camps up there.
Yeah.
And so, that can be scary stuff.
Absolutely. No thanks. I make sure that I have an extra battery to charge my phone, because it's my GPS. And as long as you have a bearing, you can get yourself out of most situations. But I can't even imagine before that.
Well, right. And, talking about the apps, I never used the Onyx until like last year when I really started using it. And I love that app.
Yeah, me too. It's amazing. I use it. I have the multiple state one, and I've got some pins in Washington. I've got pins in Colorado and Texas and Kansas and Oklahoma. So keeping them to myself, but it's a very useful tool no matter what.
Oh, well, I thought you'd probably want to share those, but but yeah, I just, last year, in fact, I had just figured out how to do the offline maps. I just figured that out, that it actually tracks you whether you have signal or not.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the best feature. Just got to make sure you download them ahead of time, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. You got to download the maps, and they aren't as clear as if you got great signal, but you can still figure out where you are.
Yeah,
and but you was talking about bear hunting. I just got back into the bear hunting here a couple of years ago, but where I live, there's lots of acorns in certain years if we get lots of rain, which we haven't had lately. But man, I am loving the bear hunting.
Oh, yeah.
On the ground. That's the thing, since they outlawed the spring hunt. And And I just started doing that. And I've been hunting them in Colorado, at least where I live. I've been hunting them over water.
Mm-hmm.
Not because necessarily that they're drinking, because most of them weren't, but when it's hot, the first couple weeks of the September thing, they come in for a swim.
Interesting.
If that pond is deep enough, and of course, if you have lots of acorns, they're eating 20 to 22 hours a day when they're getting ready to hibernate. And those things, man, if they're eating those acorns because they're so dry, they go to water quite a bit during the day because they have to have water to digest that acorns.
Yeah.
And man, I've just been having some fun with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this season. Like I said, I've seen some, but I've never really gotten a good stock other than that one time, and then I ended up just spooking it through the bushes. So I never actually even saw it other than just some brown fur about 10 yards away through some trees.
Right. Well, I shot another good boar 2 years ago. That's on my Instagram page, I think. But it was that was the 12th bear I seen.
Oh, wow.
Same location. Yeah.
And without putting out any gourmet seafood dinners, right?
And without any gourmet dinners. That is
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to have to let you know how my bear season goes because I'm pretty excited about it. Again, it is supplementary to my elk season. But hopefully, the place that I've been elk hunting the last few years, I've seen a bear every day. So hopefully that continues, and hopefully I get after some. Because I really want to get some of the bear fat, and I want to render that down for cooking.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love bear meat, and especially they're out. People. I mean, look at the people in Alaska. They live for their bear seasons, and their black bear especially, but black bears, they eat a lot of grasses. They eat berries. They eat acorns. They eat a lot of good stuff. They aren't killers. Really, they get lucky a while and maybe take a fawn or something, but generally, I mean, they're scavengers, and they're pretty good eating here. I like it. I make a lot of Italian sausage and breakfast sausage. I like it. So, but if you're doing nothing during the middle of the day, I would check for water ponds.
Okay.
Because I never even went out early in the morning or late at night. I went from like 10 in the morning to 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I bears all the time.
I'll make sure I'll take note of that. I can think of at least 2 ponds specifically where I do most of my hunting. And I have sat the pond one day, but nothing happened that year. In fact, a herd of cattle came in and basically spooked everything. Our cameras had elk, deer, bear, turkeys. We even had an antelope at 9,000 feet. But when that herd of cattle came through, our cameras did not catch one animal other than cattle for the next 5 weeks.
Right. And what I found, the bears, what I do all summer is I hike around. I look at Google Earth and I try to find all these little ponds on Google Earth because you can't really pick them up on the Onyx. Mm-hmm. But you can see them real good on Google Earth, and then I just transpose the information and whatnot. But then I just started hiking all summer long and look at all these different ponds. Of course, almost all of them you see bear tracks at, but the ones that they really like are the ones that are totally secluded, surrounded by trees, because if they're out open, they probably ain't coming till after dark.
Yeah, that makes enough sense. Well, Mike, do you have any other stories you want to tell us today, or you've given us a lot? You've given us all sorts of different critter stories, and you've given us even some tactics, which is not usually something we get into on the podcast. But any additional stories you want to share?
No, I think that's about it.
All right. All right, man. Well, then what we'll do is we'll pencil in another time to talk after this hunting season, because I'm sure you'll have more stories for us here at the end of probably October, November. But why don't we tell the people, where they can find you? Tell them about your Instagram, and if there's anything else you want to share, let them know.
Oh, sure. My Instagram is Ole Guy Hunting. That's OLE Guy Hunting with underscores in between the words. Ole Guy Hunting, and check it out. Make some comments. Like, I would say subscribe, but it's not YouTube.
Just give him a follow.
Yeah.
Well, perfect, Mike. I appreciate you so much being on the podcast. This is fun. You're the exact type of person that I want to hear stories from. Someone who's been doing it for a long time, seen a lot of different things, and put down a lot of animals. So again, thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Michael. You have a good evening.
Yeah, you as well. All right, folks. That's it. A couple more stories in the books. I want to send a sincere thank you to Michael Gabardi for coming on the podcast and sharing all those stories with us. I know some of them are going to stick with me, particularly that one where he had the cheering squad as he put down that goat. I've actually put a ton of photos on the Instagram account, so please go check those out. Michael was happy enough or willing to share plenty of photos with me. I might actually have to do several posts to get them all in there. That being said, we're still looking for new storytellers. Michael I reached out to hear his stories, but I want you to reach out to me to tell me your stories. I've had a couple people already do exactly that, and I'll tell you what, I love the people in the industry and the amazing stories that they have to tell, but some of the best stories I've heard so far all seem to be coming from folks like yourself that are just the average everyday hunter. So get in touch with us. Follow us on Instagram. It's huntingstories_official. And of course, go to your favorite podcast app. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, whatever it may be, and subscribe. And share the podcast with anyone you know. We've got to grow this thing so that we can share these stories far and wide. So that's it, folks. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all tuning in. I want to thank you again to Michael Gabardi, Ole Guy Hunting. Again, check the show notes to see his Instagram. Thanks again for tuning in. Now go make some stories of your own.